Hello everyone. Today we are going to discuss a biological basis of behavior. So in psychology, when we move on to the more complex concepts and more complex theories, first of all, let's understand the basic of our behavior, of our existence. And so we'll cover two topics, that is evolutionary and genetic perspective in biological. But before we move on to anything, let us just discuss what exactly biological basis means. Well, biological basis is a collection of brain systems, endocrine system, genetics, as well as other organs of the body. That is the structure and the mechanism that underlie the organs of the body, our system, which affects our behavior. That is what exactly biological basis means. And coming to the term, what is behavior? It has been defined as an organism's activities in response to external or internal stimuli, including objectively observable activities, covert behavior, and non-conscious processes. Behaviorist theorists defined or restricted it to all those activities that can be seen or heard, observed, and measured. As we go into further details, we'll see that these are bidirectional influence rather than unidirectional. Coming to the classification of biological basis of behavior, we can classify biological basis of behavior into four types. The first one is physiological. Physiological basis of behavior basically relates the behavior to the part of the brain and other organs. The ontogenetic basis of behavior describes how a behavior developed. Evolutionary basis of behavior reconstructs the evolutionary history of a behavior and tells us how this behavior evolved. And the functional basis of behavior describes why a behavior evolved as it did and what function does it serve. Mostly it's for survival. So let us understand what exactly affects behavior. Is it our nature? Nature includes our genes and neuroendocrine system, all our organs, the whatever is inside our body, that is our nature. Or is it nurture? That is the environmental influences like our family, peers, society, culture. Or is it both? Well, that is for the people who debate. We are bending more towards an interactionist approach, which says that it's both nature and nurture. So let us come to the evolutionary perspective. First of all, Homo sapiens have come a very long way. The best dictum of how we survived is given by Charles Darwin, who gave the theory of survival of the fittest. The theory focuses on the biological structures, psychological processes, and behaviors that were serving adaptive functions. The genetic and evolutionary heritage plays a very great role in our present day form. Genetic heritage adds to our uniqueness, while evolutionary heritage adds to our sameness or commonness that we share with other people. So, evolution can be defined as something very gradual and a very orderly biological change that results in a species from their pre-existing form in response to the changing adaptational demands of the environment. And that is why it helps us to survive. Now, evolution in behavior. If we come to this, let us see what exactly is evolution and how does it really affect our behavior. Charles Darwin's theory of evolution doesn't have sufficient evidence. At that time, it didn't have sufficient evidence. It was a hypothesis, but due to the scientific developments, biochemical similarities have been found in the fossils discovered, which support this theory of evolution. So, evolution happens through three factors: variability, adaptation, and selection. Variability occurs through mating and mutations in genes. These variations, if leading to structural and behavioral characteristics that adapt to the environment, then they are passed on to the next generations, and thus they help us to survive and hence are preserved through natural selection. This was a theory of survival of the fittest. So, both physical structures and behaviors that help us to adapt to environment are selected. A behavior that is characteristic of a species evolves like physical structures and it is known as species-specific behavior. So, coming to this, let us discuss what exactly is species-specific behavior. Though we are going to discuss this thing in evolutionary psychology in much detail in later phases, but let's see a brief introduction to what species-specific behavior is. And the person who did a detailed study for species-specific behavior is Konrad Lorenz, Nico Tinbergen, who studied about this behavior. So the conditions for a behavior to be classified into species-specific behavior are: first, all normal individuals should display that behavior of that particular species. Second, it is genetically based, but environment plays a very important role in development of this behavior. Genetic potential cannot be expressed in vacuum. And third, fixed action patterns, a stereotyped pattern of movements triggered by a stimulus found in all members of a species. So, lower animals have many fixed action patterns, but humans have very complicated brains and they do not solely rely on instincts. Thus, it is very difficult to find fixed action patterns in humans, but we can still find few like sucking reflex, emotional expressions. These are some of the examples. The adaptation of our brains to become so specialized is a result of evolution, and that is why we are the strongest species existing in the world in terms of behavior. So, what are the different things? What is different between us and our pre-existing forms? Well, we are very different with our pre-existing forms in three important ways. The first is a bigger and developed brain with increased capacity for cognitive behaviors like perception, memory, reasoning, problem solving, use of language for communication, which the other species lack. Second, an ability to walk upright on two legs. This can be said called as bipedalism. And third, a free hand with a workable opposing thumb. Just to understand that these patterns, how are they important for our survival? Well, sucking reflex definitely helps a child to survive because he wants to suck the milk and he sucks everything that comes in the area of nearby his mouth, and that helps him to survive. Grasping reflex is a result of evolution, basically found in fur-carrying animals, but in humans it is vestigial, and probably in a few centuries or later it is going to disappear. So, does natural selection benefit us? Yes, of course. We know it helps us to survive. I've been saying that a lot of time. Okay? This is a model of evolution in genetic perspective, and we all know that it's all mingled up, mixed up, but evolution helps us to create a gene that might be new. This gene comes in, interacts with the current environment. Finally, it forms the present existing form of organism, which again interacts with the current situation or current environment and forms a current behavior. And this current behavior, once it helps us to survive or it serves a very important function, it becomes a part of our behavior, and this is what leads to evolution again. So genetic expression cannot be done in. Now coming to the genetic perspective. Well, the study of inheritance of physical and psychological characteristics from ancestors is called as genetics. And evolution gives us all a very common heritage. I'm again going to repeat this point that evolution gives us all a common heritage. But it is the genes which give us our uniqueness. Like we all have developed brains, we all walk on two legs. But the variations among the same species is caused by genes. No two people are same. Everyone is different, and that we owe to our genes. Now everyone knows that chromosomes are the hereditary elements of the body. They are thread-like paired structures in the nucleus of each. And what is this mechanism of heredity? Well, even two identical twins are almost alike, but they are not exactly alike. In humans, the number of chromosomes is 23 pairs, that is 46 chromosomes. Each pair of chromosome comes from both father and mother. The member of this pair which is dominant is expressed. The genotype is the genetic constitution, while the phenotype is the expression of those. Most of the psychological traits that are heritable have polygenic determination, which means that each trait is determined by more than one gene. This is still under study, and that is why it is very difficult to determine the biological or genetic causes of a psychological disorder. Now, what exactly is a gene-environment correlation? How is genes and our environment correlated? So let us discuss. Genes do not always directly affect our traits. In many cases, it affects the environment that influences our behavior. And this we can study in the diathesis stress model, which we are again going to elaborate at some point in the presentations later. Now, the gene-environment relationship can be classified into passive gene-environment relationship. Here, the correlation refers to the association with the genotype a child inherits from his parents and environment in which the child is raised. Child here is not playing any active role. For example, well, parents with a trait of high IQ will definitely give their children an environment that is stimulating their IQ. Thus, child will show higher IQ, right? So, active gene-environment relationship. Active gene-environment relationship occurs when individual possesses a heritable inclination to select environmental exposure, also known as niche building. Example, extrovert children look out for environment that help them to socialize more frequently. Very simple. So, how do we study genetics? Well, there are various methods to study genetics, but till now we haven't found a way to exactly, accurately, and firmly establish a relationship between our psychological traits and genes. But we are trying hard. Well, some of the methods are family history method. The samples of relatives of each index case are studied to see whether the incidence increases in proportion to the degree of hereditary relationship. Then we have a twin method where we study identical twins who share the same genotype, so a psychological trait should show 100% concordance rate. But this is not so. Thus, no psychological trait is completely heritable. But the concordance rate for identical twins is much higher than non-identical twins or siblings. This can be due to the fact that identical twins are treated similarly more than non-identical twins or siblings. Third is adoption method. Well, individuals do not share family environment but are genetically related. Those individuals are studied and they are compared with biological parents who had certain disorders. Now we have attempted to locate genes which are responsible for a trait, and that can be done by two methods. First is linkage analysis. Several locations on chromosomes for physical characteristics are known. A psychological trait in an index case and family is studied. The presence of this trait along with physical trait can help in spotting the location. For example, in your family, if everyone who suffered from depression also had blue eyes, means that we can locate the gene for depression nearby the gene which is responsible for blue eyes. And second method is association studies. Two large groups of individuals are taken, one with disorder and the other without the disorder. The frequency of genetic markers, that is the known physical traits are compared. If one genetic marker occurs more frequently in group with disorder, then a particular gene located with disorder is located on the same chromosome. So we have somehow found that bipolar disorder, the gene exists on chromosome 11, while for schizophrenia, it is the chromosome 1, 6, 8, and 22. And these studies are still being studied. More research needs to be done. And till then, we'll just take a break. Okay? And bye bye. Thank you.